Welcome back to another episode of the Tim Macy Show. And today we have the man leading the charge for change in NAR, and that is Jason Haber. Jason, welcome to the show. Thanks for giving us some time. Thanks for all the work you're doing.
I love it. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let me kind of set the table here because I got into the business in 2015.
Okay.
So, geez, what was I, 29 or so, 28? I forget how old I was. But younger-ish guy gets into the business in 2015, has to sign up for NAR, gets told all the reasons why I should be a part of it and why I should be proud to be a realtor. And I think in my generation, I think we're a little skeptical of the whole thing. And I've never felt super represented. I've never felt like my money was going to a great place. But I also never felt like it was worth my time to
Yeah.
really try to make any change, because I know that's the first thing. If I talk to someone, they're like, well, you have to join the thing. You have to be a
Right.
part. And it's like, guys, I don't agree with the whole thing. So I'm not going to
Right.
go be a part of it.
You have time for it too. Like you're trying to build your business. You're not making any money. You're not earning fees, but making client relationships, spending time taking on your trade association.
Yeah, and my experience with committees hasn't been over the top effective. It's not like,
Awesome.
oh, remember that really effective committee I was on?
Yeah.
But anyways, you have been the one to step up, take the reins, and say, hey, I'm gonna lead the charge to do something. And that's why I have a ton of respect for what you're doing. And we could dive into the different directions and the different stuff that you're doing, but I just love that somebody stepped up, took the reins to make this charge. And so give me a little background on yourself and kind of how we got to where we're at today with you leading this movement for significant change at NAR.
Well, it's interesting. I've been an agent for 17 years, but I've had my license in New York City where we're members of REBNY. So I wasn't even a member of NAR. So I've never been to an event. I've never been to a forum and I never even been to their website until a few months ago. I mean, I had nothing to do with them. I was active to a degree with REBNY. I then got my license in the state of Florida, where I'm actually right now in Boca Raton, where we're recording this, because I'm traveling back and forth constantly. I work in both markets in New York and South Florida. So I recently joined NAR. So I'm like the most junior member who basically decided to take them on. Now, before I was in real estate, I have a background in media, government, politics, and academia. I wrote a book called The Business of Good, available at Amazon for those who are looking over my shoulder here. My publisher will be
I
happy
love
that I
I
wrote
love
it.
love the plug. I love the plug. Yeah.
And I was a professor for a number of years, and I was organizing background. And so I had the experience of what it takes to build a coalition when one needs to do such a thing. Over the 17 years in my career in real estate, haven't really used that tool belt too often, but it's good to have that experience. And then when on August 31st, the New York Times reports on rampant sexual harassment and toxic work culture at NAR, it was a Saturday morning. I was about to actually play tennis. I figured by the time I got off the court, this guy who was accused would be gone. There'd be all this outrage and it would be done. I get off the court. I'm telling you, Tim, there was nothing. There was no comment on social media. There was no demand that he go. In fact, the early read was that he's going to stay on and nothing's going to change. I just thought it was, first, I thought it was weird. I thought it was wrong. And I got involved that weekend. I said, look, all right, well, I don't know why no one cares about sexual harassment and toxic work culture, but clearly this guy should go. So I started a petition on change.org saying of NAR should go. Okay, fine. We got a bunch of signatures. It actually gained momentum pretty quickly. 48 hours later, he was gone. Okay, great. I actually thought I was done. I had a business to run in 2 different markets that requires me to fly back and forth regularly. I tell people I live on Delta rather than where I actually live these days because I'm so constantly traveling. All right, so I'm done. That's when the phone call started. Utah, Florida, West Virginia, California, New York, Wisconsin, Illinois, and on and on and on. Women were calling me, telling me their stories of sexual harassment, abuse, and rape. Either they were victims at the hand of a NAR member, NAR executive, or at an NAR event. They had seen my contact information because when the president resigned, I was quoted in the article, in the New York Times article, because I launched this online petition and became vocally active. And it was at that point that I realized there was a lot more work that needed to be done. I, I was honored that they shared their stories with me. I don't know why they trusted me, but owed it to them, I felt like, to do what other people hadn't done before, which is to hear them out and respond to them and show them that I cared. And that's just the thing. People just, it's hard to explain. They just didn't care, or they didn't care enough to do anything. I mean, maybe they cared and they heard the story, but it was like, oh, that's terrible. Okay, pass the salt. And they just kind of moved on. I decided I wasn't going to do that. The next day, so this is now a Wednesday, I formed the NAR Accountability Project, and I met with victims. I met with people who are in NAR, senior people at NAR, current and former. And we put together a 4-point plan because I said, we can't just saber rattle and make a lot of noise. I want to be very specific. What are the 4 things we need to do right now that will change NAR instantly? Okay, I got my 4. Working with them, we put a petition together. Here are our 4 plans. I submitted it to as many emails, addresses as I can get of the NAR executive committee. Sent it to them, never heard back. I tried to reach out to a bunch of people, never heard back. The strategy was to ignore me, which in retrospect was idiotic. And maybe no one looked me up to see my background, or maybe they just thought I'd go away. I don't know. I don't know. But let's fast forward just 6.5 weeks later. 3 of our 4 demands have been met, or largely aspects of them met. We have 1 to go, and we're going to continue our work until all 4 are met. But the NAR of today is fundamentally different from the NAR of just 6.5 weeks ago when we started on this journey. We've built a 1,500 strong agent coalition. We have agents in all 50 states that are with us. They're active. They're engaged whenever we launch a new campaign saying, hey, do this today, do this, let's go. The things we've done over the last 6 weeks, we organized a press conference with elected officials in Chicago. We got NAR's Great Place to Work certification revoked. The president resigned. The CEO resigned. They launched an independent investigation from an outside law firm, which was one of our demands.
Yeah.
They instituted third-party HR reporting. So when there is an incident, it gets taken outside the chain of command. Another one of our demands. So it's a very different place today than it was. And I think our work has a lot to do with that. I'm really proud of what we've accomplished. But it's not a victory for me. It's not a victory for the organization. It's a victory for those women that I mentioned at first. The ones who had been silenced, the ones who no one really listened to and fought for. They found a champion in our organization. We vowed to see it through. We've done just that.
Well, you said, I don't know why they reached out to you. I believe they probably reached out to you because they saw someone stepping up. And that is, I think, the biggest thing. For the longest time I've been in the industry, it's been like, hey, what is the deal with NAR? Just is what it is. Just is the way it is. Like, we'll just keep moving along. Just, $50-60 million on ads.
Right.
It's stupid, but whatever. It just is the way it is. And it's that kind of culture of it's not going to change. It's not worth putting the effort into change. It's not doing. That's what creates the disconnect to be able to say, we're going to keep doing things the way we do them. And then it allows for things that were the awful things that we saw happening. I mean, that's what happens when you have a disconnected culture is bad things
Right.
can
So you have
ferment.
a broken culture in the organization, and you have, like you said, you're like, I pay the dues I have no choice but to pay the dues. At the American Medical Association, 17% of doctors roughly are members of the American Medical Association. Why? Because it's optional to join. The way it's set up right now is it's mandatory to join, and no one can actually answer why that is.
Yeah.
And you look at how they spend our money, right? So they are the biggest political contributor from a trade association perspective. And what do we get back as members? Look no further. I would encourage everyone who's checking this out. If you go to the New York Times and look at the story on the lawsuit when the jury issued its ruling. Just read the comments in that article. There are over 1,200 comments in that New York Times story. It was the most commented on story they had that day and that week. There were more comments on the realtor story than there were on the Israeli-Hamas war. Think about that. All of the comments, 95% of them, are negative
Yeah.
about us and
Yeah.
about industry. And they don't know what we do. They don't understand why we make the money that we make. They have no conception of what it means to be a broker, an agent, a realtor, whatever the hell you want to call it. They don't know. What the fuck have they been spending all this money on for all these years? And this is the result they get? Obviously, they're not marketing us right to the public. If the public truly knew how hard we work and what we do, I assure you, they would gladly pay our fee, because our fee is a value add proposition that protects the American consumer. But they don't see it that way. Part of that is because there's been no proper marketing campaign and advertising campaign that effectively explains what we do. Instead, it's somehow been outsourced to reality TV, and people don't understand reality, but they see the reality TV where I don't know, I don't watch the shows, but whatever goes on those shows, I'm sure it's not exactly what you or I do day in, day out. But that's the public perception. It's become reality, and there's been no counterweight to that. So they believe it's real. They believe we're overpaid. They believe we sort of have a rigged system against the American consumer, and it's nonsense.
Well, contrary to like most people's view, my life actually isn't like selling sunset. It's a little bit different, and I agree. Like if their job is public perception, then they failed. And I think one of the things I wonder about though, Jason, is you started this thing, you're making waves, you're doing this stuff. How many board members are there at NAR?
Over 900. That's a great point.
Yeah, there's over 900 board members, which is just ridiculous. Show me a publicly traded company that's efficient that has 900 board members.
So
It's
Apple
ridiculous.
has 10, IBM has 12, the American Cancer Society, so nonprofit, has 17, and on and on and on you go. So like there is no peer comp to a board of 900 in America.
So
it just doesn't exist.
My question is that there's 900 board members and none of them reached out to you to say, hey, like we want to be a part of change, or none of the 900 board members raised their hand and said, hey, I've been watching this too long and I want to be a part of this change?
So guess what? So yeah, actually a lot of them did reach out.
Okay. All right. Good. So, good. This is why I asked the question, because
this I actually, so Tim, this I haven't discussed before. So a lot, I don't know how many, but quite a number of board members privately, not publicly, which is okay, reached out thrilled with what we were doing. Someone had to do this. You're the one, good for you. And we never thought we'd see this. There's never been a counterweight to the conversation within NAR, and keep doing what you're doing was the message I got over and over and over again.
Well, I like that. Like that makes me feel good. What I worried was that there's 900 board members and nobody reached out to you. So that's
so the executive committee, which is, by the way, 68 people. There's 4 on Apple, 6 on IBM. Yeah. It was like 68 to 73. I don't know the exact number, but none of them reached out. But
and it just goes back to say, like, here's my view. I look at why Tesla is successful, in my opinion. They looked at the car industry and said, we're not going to model what the car industry looks like. We're going to think, hey, if we were going to build a car company today from the ground up, what would it look like? And so their distribution looks different. Or the way they sell looks different. How many models they have looks like. They just said, hey, if we were going to build the car company of today, what would it look like? And it's kind of the same thing I look at with NAR, which I think I'm pie in the sky. This is never going to happen. But if we step back and said, hey, let's pretend NAR doesn't exist, and we were going to build whatever association we needed for today's world, what would that look like? Because in my opinion, so much of NAR has just been about keeping NAR intact. Like, we're just going to keep this thing intact. Let's just keep the gravy train rolling. Yeah. Let's not change anything too much. Let's just try to keep the thing. When you look at the clear cooperation policy and some of these other things they've put in place. Again, as a person who hasn't been in the business relatively that long, who I think tries to bring an outside perspective, I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like,
Right.
you're just trying to stop change, which is never a place for innovation and improvement. What are the chances and you've gotten some amazing things done over the last, what, 3 months? I don't know how long it's been, but
Almost 7 weeks.
okay, almost 7 weeks. Amazing. But what are the chances we really get a total scraping and rebuilding of NAR from the ground up for today that agents need today?
Well, it's possible. I mean, I've said publicly I was excited about the CEO, the interim CEO hire.
Yeah.
It's someone outside the cabal in there in Chicago in the office. It's someone who understands it's a digital and new media. I don't, so I'll break a little news here. We have been in touch. Yeah,
Woo! You
I'm
heard it
not,
here first.
you heard it here first. We're breaking news. So as a first, it's much more contact than I've had with the prior regime.
Yeah.
I'll refrain from sort of going into any detail on our initial conversation, other than to say it was positive, and I'll keep you updated from here. But that's the opportunity now, and I hope that they would listen to me. I think I've proven myself pretty well the last few weeks, and to try to reshape the organization. Because I'm an institutionalist by nature. I'm not a radical. I don't think anyone would call me that. I want to see a healthy trade association for our industry, because I know firsthand the power and
Yeah.
importance of lobbying and issue advocacy in the real estate industry. I want us to have a strong trade association advocating for us, helping us, educating the public as to what we do. And so I want to see them successful and to see them thrive. They just needed to make a whole lot of changes to change the culture within the organization, just to reset things.
Yeah.
That's what I've been pushing for. And I do think that they can be a real force for us, a real advocate for us, if they just get out of their own way and do the hard work that's necessary. And listen, we've been a strong advocate out there. Obviously, we've already pushed forward a lot of changes. I cannot tell you how many people told me I was wasting my time. I'd be hurting my business.
Yeah. Yeah. Look,
You're going to come after me.
what you just said though is why I think nobody else has done it.
Yeah,
Everybody's just assumed it would be a waste of time. Now, when it comes to attempting to help with the change, but also not wasting time, take my era, right? Take people of my era, as I think we're pushing the new way of real estate. I think we're pushing a different thing than maybe people before us were. We are turned off by NAR, but
yeah,
like you said, I don't want to see NAR go. I
right.
just want to see it radically different. Like I do want to see a complete reshaping and have it be much more connected. I think obviously the sexual abuse stuff is awful, but I think it's a symptom. Like that
That's right.
disconnect,
That's
that
right.
yeah, that disconnect from any type of responsibility and that disconnect from the people you're supposed to be serving is the kind of culture that leads to things like that. And so, one thing that if you've been on my podcast, we talk some about our company. One thing I love about our company is there's no big corporate bureaucracy where company leadership and agents, right? It's
Yeah,
very tight. And so that leads to leadership being very connected to the people they serve. The NAR bureaucracy is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And so how do we kind of compress the bureaucracy so they're more connected? And how do you think agents, like, what should I do if you're going to tell me to do something to hopefully be a part of the change? Like, what do you think that looks like?
okay, so two great questions there. So one, I do think they need an organizational reboot. Probably take the 900 board members down to, I don't know, 50, maybe 100, one or two per state as a starter, and then eventually break it down by region, East, West, South, Midwest. No one has been able to make the argument that you can have an efficient board of directors with 900 of them.
It's a
No
joke.
one, no one
It's
will
a
take the
joke.
other side of that. So
Hold
let's
on, you
do
know what it
that.
is? It's all the
Well, there's
ego thing.
Well, there's ego. There is some comp. There's some travel
Yeah.
perks. And from some different states. I've
It's
heard.
all the
Not
gravy train, all the bureaucratic crap that we know is the problem. 900 board members, 900 incentives, 900 people that get to say, "Yep, that's, that's me." Like, it's just such a political thing that, again, I think the whole thing needs to be torn down and
yeah,
rebuilt.
there's an organizational revamp, cultural change. So for those who want to get involved, though, honestly, join the NAR Accountability Project. Go to agentsfinancing.com, sign up your email. We have 1,500, it's probably more now. I haven't looked in a few days, but we have at least 1,500 agents in there. We're not just the leading advocate for change. I think we're the only advocate for change, or
Well, the
like the
only organized one, I would
only
say.
organized one. I think that what's interesting is so during the last 7 weeks, a lot of folks came out and said things like, NAR needs to change. NAR needs to make changes. NAR needs to implement reforms. Okay, awesome. What are they? No one said anything specific, which is why we were so different, because I wasn't just out there pontificating. I said, here are 4 things you could do
Yeah.
today that will change it. And it's right now we're 3 down, 1 to go. And the one, by the way, that remains, I should know because it's super important, is to release women from their NDAs. There
Yeah.
are many women, I've spoken to them personally, who are under NDA, and they want to tell their truth, but they're not able to because they signed these NDAs. This is time for a flush out. Flush out the old and start anew. And if you release them from the NDAs, let them, whoever wants to speak, speak. Whoever doesn't want to speak, fine. Get it out and be done with it. And then you can move on. That's just how this thing works. Let them speak, end the policy of signing NDAs when there is sexual harassment, and move the hell on. It'll allow the women, the victims, to move on. It will allow the organization to move on, and we can turn the page. That's how we get the full flush out of all this here. And then we move on. So that would be my prescription.
I think the biggest frustration, or one of the biggest frustrations, is it doesn't seem like there's this big move for NAR to change and to make radical change. It's like, okay, how do we appease and keep the good old boys club together? Like, how do
Right.
we, and
Well,
that's where the NDA thing is
yeah.
really,
So,
that's like the line in the sand,
and
you
I
know?
should mention on the NDAs, the ones who have spoken to me, I know they've signed NDAs, but I don't know the stories because they are under NDA. I should just
Yeah.
clarify that.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but yes, it is a symptom of the problem where that was the acceptable culture. Someone gets harassed. It's not just that they're comp for the harass, but their silence is paid for. If you're going, NDAs really aren't done anymore. Now they're, after we've got, but some of the NDAs are only a few years old. So they were
Yeah.
doing them, and they should remove that. Like, it's one, if you're paid, if you get compensation because you were a victim, that's one thing. If you're being silenced because you're taking the compensation, today that's seen as unacceptable,
Mhm.
as an unacceptable solution. And muzzling people is never good for your culture. And like, that's what we're seeing here. There are plenty of women who, if they had the ability to speak, the things that they would say, while it would be hard to hear, I think at that point we'd frame people would understand that's how the organization was, and they've turned the page. The CEO is gone, the president is gone. They have new policies in place, a lot of them that we've pushed through. And I think there would be an acceptance and understanding of, okay, it's out there. Okay, good. Now let's move forward. So
Yeah.
that's why we hope that, I think there'll be a big move for their culture change there.
Yeah, that would be more of them saying, like, showing us that this is what they're
Yeah,
about, not telling us this is what they're about. Like, that's an
right.
action
It's not lip
that
service
says,
or
yeah.
BS. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I think the frustrating part for me sometimes is, like, listen, diversity, equity, inclusion is something that I'm pretty passionate about. I try
Good.
to create a culture and everything for everyone. I just I believe in believing in people, and I believe in people feeling welcome, and I think that's been a big part of our business. That being said, with what we're facing as an industry, with the lawsuit,
Yeah.
with the other stuff, and then you've got all the sexual harassment stuff that's happened at NAR, and I'm sure if it's the type of good old boys club that has led to those types of things, I'm sure they also have some diversity and inclusion issues as well. But for me, sending my money to NAR every year and having that be the number one thing on their priority list for the year is frustrating for me.
Yeah.
It's like, why isn't this just a given when we're facing all these things we're facing in the industry? Why is our culture so bad that we have to make this a top priority? And that's why I think I get this feeling of, if we're having, and you've pushed for a bunch of this tearing down of what's happened, but that in itself is such a red flag for me. The fact that we
Right.
have to spend so much time and resources on defense. How much money do we spend on defending these guys? How much money do we spend in the compensation, which I'm not knocking the compensation, but why was this a problem for so long? That's the thing for me. It's like our top priority should be handling the issues that our agents are dealing with day to
Not
day.
only was it a problem, we now know that they knew it was a problem. Over a year and a half ago, they had an attorney that works with them investigated NAR and sent a letter saying, I found these allegations to be valid in many cases. And he said, women
Yeah.
and men in leadership were responsible. And they knew about it. Yet when the New York Times asked the former CEO if NAR had a problem with sexual harassment, he said no. He said, I don't think we do. So there's this sort of cognitive disconnect that existed there. And it allowed there were a lot of incidents of, forced kissing, uncomfortable touching at NAR
It's awful.
events that folks would come to and tell
Yep.
me about. It was this really rough culture. I just want to read to you, I won't mention the name, but one of the women who was a victim sent me a note. I got a lot of notes, but just one I wanted to share because I just happen to have it up here. She wrote to me, you can't even imagine how many female former employees I'm hearing from right now. Thank you for standing for us when no one else would. I think it's hard. I mean, I love the sentiment, but how horrible.
Yeah.
No, like it wasn't just one, not just one, because one is too many, but there were so many victims across the country. And I'll give you another quick example. This one hasn't been out there yet, but I think it will be soon. In West Virginia, the West Virginia
Mhm.
Realtors Association, they have a serial sexual harasser in the organization. West Virginia, they don't have access to media. The markets like we do.
Yep.
It's a more rural community. And they showed me emails going back, I kid you not, 10 years, 2013. They were emailing NAR asking for help.
Mhm.
No response for 10 years. So what happened? More victims. Because he's basically getting the thumbs
The
up
green
signal.
light.
No one's going to do anything, right?
Yeah.
And so how many victims between 2013 and today? I was actually a little dubious of the claim at first. I was like, how could they not respond? And I was like, do you actually have the emails? And sure enough, they did, going back 10 years.
Crazy.
It was a very deep problem, but I think in the last 6 weeks, we've made a lot of changes. I think that I'm hopeful that the NAR I've referenced here as the NAR of the past. And there's a new interim CEO, female person of color,
Yeah.
exceptionally talented person. And I think we have a really exciting opportunity here for both the organization and the industry, because we have a lot of work to do within our industry. Our reputation is in the trash. That's why so many people were celebrating the lawsuit.
Yep.
And we have real work to do. And because NAR is our trade association, because they have so much notoriety, so much money, our money, they're important. And so I made the decision that this was more important to me than anything else that I was working on at the time. And I still was able to service my clients very well over the last 6 weeks. I have lots of deals that went into contract, and it didn't affect my business at all. But if it did, so what? So
Yeah.
be it. This is something that was bigger than any of us, and it was important to do.
So back on the agent side of things, like how agents can be a part of whatever the change is coming. One, I do like that you have a organized place for agents to be a part of the conversation. I think that's really important. I'm also interested on your take in, like, how does this work at the local level? Like, how much can agents raise their hand at their local board and say,
Yeah.
hey, like, we don't want to put up with this. We want you to go speak up at the national level.
Well, it does help to speak to the state boards because they do have sway at the national level. So, we did a lot of email campaigns where people wrote to their state boards and then the state boards reported back to NAR. We actually have pre-written emails for people on our website at agentsdemandchange.com. If you want to get scripts there, you just fire away and you can send off emails. We try to make it as easy as possible. It does help if you have the time to go to the state meetings when they do exist and just voice your opinion. You can say, listen, hey, I signed up with the NAR Accountability Project. I think what's happening is lousy and I want to be part of the change. And I hope you'll advocate for change, and the status quo just isn't working. Like, that's the thing. It's not working. And yes, the sexual harassment case and the lawsuit on the surface have nothing to do with each other. I
Oh,
don't
they
want
do.
to, but they're inextricably linked.
Yeah.
They're linked because they speak to this broader problem within the organization and the industry that was just laid bare
Well,
and was just exposed.
you can look at the closing remarks from NAR, and they were condescending. They
Yes,
were
kind of.
like, it was ridiculous. And it's almost that same thing. Like, they didn't, that's been their defense and that's been their position. And they don't realize they're condescending and disconnected and all the things. Like, I think they think, this was a good closing argument, when in actuality, they pretty much told the jury, hey, don't be stupid. Let's go with us. I'm like,
Right.
like, that's a closing argument? Like, what are you
Yes. So there
doing?
were lots of comments about the closing argument, which I think was probably on brand for
Yeah, totally
NAR.
on brand.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting stuff. Look, where's the best place to jump on the NAR Accountability Project?
So agentsdemandchange.com.
Okay.
You can sign up there, or you can ping me on my socials at Jason Haber on Twitter X or on Instagram. For those who use Facebook, I'm not a big Facebook person, but we do have a Facebook group for the NAR
Yep.
Accountability Project, which we launched because a lot of agents were like, hey, I'm on Facebook, not on
Yeah.
Twitter. So we did
Conversations happen on Facebook comment sections.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So you can find us on Facebook too. A bunch of folks there. So those are the best ways to reach me. And agentsdemandchange.com. You can sign up there to get our updates. We, even though we've accomplished a lot, we're not quite ready to. We're not done yet. We still have the NDA work, which is really, really, really important. So
yeah.
we'd love as much support as we can get on the NDA front.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think about too is, when you talk about these meetings and you talk about, showing up to stuff, you got to think about the type of agent that is showing up to the meetings. It does have the time to do this stuff. In my experience, they tend not to be agents that are really connected with the consumer and how things work right now. It
Right.
mostly tends to be, agents who have been in the business for a while and want to keep things the way they are. And so there's a good chance that if you don't make your voice heard, you're probably not going to agree with the other voices that are being heard. So definitely, I encourage everybody to get to meetings and let your voice be heard.
Right. And I think that's a good point, because a lot of times people say, well, the folks who are really active are probably not, crushing it in their market. How could you do both? Right.
Yeah.
So if you can be involved to some degree, you probably can get a lot of, there's probably a lot there for you. I mean, they have all these certification programs. And so sometimes you see certain agents. Do you know what any of these stand for? CRS,
Yeah,
GRIS,
no, I can't do it, man. The
CIPS,
certification stuff's a hard pass for me.
C2EX, AW, AH, AHWD,
Yeah.
APR. I have no idea what these things mean.
Yeah.
And I never met a consumer that's like, oh, my agent has their
RES.
GRR.
Yeah.
They must, but they have their RCE, so I'm definitely going to be using them. I mean, I don't know.
Well, and
Things
that's what I mean. I think consumer behavior is changing. Like,
Yeah.
consumers have access to all the information. Like, they just have all the data, and it's our job to be the ones that guide them through the process with them having all of the data. Where previously we've had an industry that has encouraged, like, trying to hold on to as much of the data as you can,
Yeah.
and being the source of the data. And
Right.
and again, that's just not the way the world works. And so the world is changing a lot faster than a lot of people in the real estate industry want to change. When I look at, like I said, the boards and everything else, tends to be people that, want to keep things the way they are, instead of bringing us into the future with however real estate's going to look.
And then, like, let me ask you this. So now you have first time buyers who may very well opt to not use a buyer's broker. It's their first purchase. They're trying to save every penny and they don't want to pay their buyer's broker. So they're going to be like, okay, I'm just going to go to TikTok and look up how to
Yeah.
buy a home and I'll be fine because there'll be like 3 cool TikToks on it and I'm good. These people are going to get fucking annihilated. They're going to get destroyed. They're going to get taken advantage of. They're going to
Yep.
get exploited. They're going to lose value and they're probably going to be in over their heads in a situation that could have entirely been avoided if they had a real estate advisor working for them. But this is the argument that is not out there for whatever reason. And that's a failure that we need to fix. But the value that agents bring and why that commission is so worth it, especially when you're working with a seasoned and experienced professional who can add value. There is no doubt that for that case that I just gave an example of, that the broker is worth every single penny, because you're going to see so many buyers taken advantage of in the coming years. And it's sad. What's out there is, oh, you don't need a broker. You can do it yourself. It's fine. Just watch a video on it. And there are people who actually think that's true. And by the time they realize it's false, it will be too late for them.
Well, the thing is too, though, the consumer wants a smoother experience. Like the real estate transaction sucks. Like there's, and a lot of our ability to stay in business is because it's a tough transaction and it's not something you want to do once every 7 years and do it by yourself without an expert there. But I think some of us know that. I think we know that the complication is what keeps us in business. And
Right.
instead of us trying to clean up that process for the consumer, instead, I think sometimes we will like to keep it a little muddy so they need us. Where I think, you know, if we don't provide that consumer a cleaner, easier experience, if we don't provide whatever real estate looks like in the future, some tech company is going to do it. And then we're
Yes.
just going to stomp our feet and be upset about it. And so when I look at NAR and everything they're doing, it's like, where is the focus on bringing agents into the future? And maybe that's not their job. Maybe that's not what a trade association should do. But I feel like that's a lot more useful to me than them running who we are ad on, the Super Bowl.
Right.
Like that Super Bowl commercial got me 0 clients, you know?
Right.
So
Well,
it's
they're very proud of the word realtor. I don't know why. I really
but
don't.
they're the only ones that are proud of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I
But
think that's where we're at. So
like when people in New York call me a realtor, I correct them. Technically, we're not in New York, but
yeah.
like I don't feel this sort of pridefulness that I think they want to convey for people who to say the word realtor. I think most people would prefer agent unless you're maybe one of the 900 people on the board. I don't know. Like I feel like I don't know why there's this obsession about the term. And I don't know why. I don't know how constructive it is. Like, what are you, an
Yeah.
agent? Are you a broker? Are you a realtor? Just pick one. Just, I don't know. It's like confusing, I think, to the marketplace. Like if I was in the American Medical Association, would I be referred to as a different kind of doctor? I don't think so. If I was in
Well,
the Trial Lawyers Association, would I be a different kind of lawyer? Like,
and I think that's the most annoying thing about the marketing spend at NAR is that we give them money and then they spend money to stay relevant. So we'll keep giving them money. Like they're spending our money to
right.
stay relevant so they can keep getting our money. And we're just like that. This is why don't you spend the money on helping us in our businesses and actually doing things that are gonna benefit us?
My guess is that we'll see what when we're recording this is before the judge's final
Yeah.
ruling is issued. So we're not sure exactly what he'll say. It'll be interesting to see if the judge addresses mandatory NAR membership or if he bifurcates it. So then when you renew, you'll have it like a checkbox option if you want to join the national board on top of the state and local. We'll
Yeah.
see.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So, look, final thoughts for the agents, for the people that are listening. What would you want to leave them with?
You know what? When I started my career, and I know, Tim, you know this, and when I started my career, I took on Muammar Gaddafi in New York City, who, believe it or not, tried to rent an apartment from me. You can look it up, true story. I stood up to him and I didn't do the deal. I turned down the money. He ended up renting from Donald Trump instead of me in New Jersey, which oddly weird way the world works.
I think we need to do
Um,
another podcast. That sounds like a
yes.
fun one.
Yeah, it's just so funny because Fox News was like they loved what I did. The New York Post loved what I did. And they were bashing Trump at the time because he took the money and I
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
What a difference 14 years made. But we're at a point now. So that was the beginning of my career. Now, later on in my career, I've also found my voice in helping these victims. And I think more broadly, trying to help the organization put a really good foot forward. We're at an inflection point for the entire industry. And, I'm sort of found myself right in the middle of this conversation and how we shape the future. What I would say is the worst thing you could do is to just put your head in the sand and just go about your business and hope that others will take care of it. But it's just not the way the world works. We're all better off when we're all actively engaged. Not everyone has to be in Chicago with me picketing and protesting and doing all that. But just to add your voice to the chorus and to not be standing on the sidelines solo, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's like if everybody just sent one message to their local board or one
Yeah, just one
message
thing.
to their state board. Because I complain about it all the time. I literally
Yeah.
have you on the podcast so we can complain about it for 43 minutes. Yet I've never sent the message. So I'm talking to myself right now. We all want to see change. We all want more from NAR. And it's time to actually just speak up, because if we all speak up, I think we can make a big impact.
Yep, 100%. And we're our collective voices were really strong. That's what we've proven over the last 6.5 weeks.
I love it. Jason, I appreciate you coming on, and I really, really wish you luck in all the future endeavors. And please, if we can do anything to help, we'd love to be a part.
You got it. Absolutely. Thanks again for having me on today. Love the show.